It allows the children then to focus their attention on the learning rather than any of the routines once they've been embedded and once they become so natural they don't think about it. It's just what they do.
They're not having to decode their teacher and, how will Sir react if I do something this way or that way. Predictability gives them that safety then, and they can put all of their cognitive load then into the learning.
This is a good few years journey, but it's really reaping the rewards now, especially for the children who have been there throughout the whole time.
We quite literally stand there still like a statue and wait. And we wait and we wait, and silence is actually a really powerful tool in that instance. And children will suddenly, they'll pick their head up and go, oh, okay, I need to be listening. And we do not continue until everyone's ready, because every child deserves the same expectation, and they learn then our real expectation.
Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, and anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. Now, this week, we reached the final episode of our 4-part mini-series on behaviour, 5 ways to promote positive behaviour for learning. Now, across the series, we have examined why behaviour feels more challenging at the moment, how it can be taught, and when and how teachers should and can seek additional support. And so for the final episode, we bring all of those threads together by looking at what happens when clear expectations, effective teaching, and consistent adult behaviour become part of the culture of an entire school. And so for this, I'm joined by Elliot Heade and Jack Pattison from St. Peter's Primary School in Cardiff. Now, Elliot and Jack are highly skilled classroom practitioners who have also played important roles in the wider transformation of teaching, learning, and behaviour across their school. And their strength lies not only in knowing a collection of useful techniques, but in understanding why those techniques work and how they fit together. And so they take us through their 5 principles for promoting positive behaviour for learning. I won't give any spoilers away, but I've had the privilege of seeing Elliot and Jack teach. And what stands out is not simply that their classrooms are calm, it's that pupils feel safe, respected, and completely ready to learn. And so this episode explores the deliberate work beneath that, what is an apparent effortlessness, and asks how schools make excellent behaviour feel less like an initiative and more like the natural way things are done. The complete mini-series, now that we're at episode 4, has been available to Ko-fi supporters. The next mini-series on curriculum will be, once episode 1 is released next week, available to subscribers at tier 3. What I'm supposed I really need to rebrand as the TDAPE Club, and the Thinking Deeply About Primary Education Club. But you go to ko-fi.com/TDAPE and subscribe to tier 3, and you get access to the sort of mini series in advance and lots of other sort of great benefits, and it helps keep the podcast ad free and sponsor free and independent, I suppose. And one of those things is that Ko-fi subscribers will receive tickets to our conferences. The next one on the horizon is TDAPE Edinburgh. Tickets have been on sale all the way through August, and more information is available at Eventbrite, link in the description. But without further ado, let's spend some time thinking deeply about primary education. So Elliot and Jack, it's lovely to see you. How are you guys?
Yeah, great, thank you. It's great, thanks for having us.
All good, thank you, Kieran. Great to speak to you today.
Yeah, so a bit of context. You guys are in St. Peter's and Cardiff. Long-time listeners to the podcast will obviously know Garth Rain, your fantastic head teacher. And I suppose this is part of a mini-series on behaviour management. Because I thought I'd gotten pretty good at behaviour management, but then I saw you guys in action. I thought, oh, there are levels to this game. And so I thought, okay, I need to find out how you guys have established the conditions you have in inner city Cardiff, and by no means a sort of easy context at all. And so I thought, yeah, let's see what your sort of guiding principles are. But I thought we'd begin with a little bit about who you are and how you got here today. I don't know, Elliot, if you want to kick us off.
So my name's Elliot Heade. I worked at St. Peter's now for about 9 years. I've been teaching for 11 years. I've lived in South Wales my whole life, so pretty used to the area. I've been in year 6 now with Jack for just gone 3 years. I've been maths and numeracy lead for the same amount of time, and we'll be teaching again in year 6 next year.
My name is Jack Pattison. I've been in St. Peter's now for coming up to 10 years. I've been in year 6 for the last 6 years, and I am the junior department lead and lead for teaching and learning in the school as well. And yeah, what we've been doing is really focusing on everything to do with not just behaviour, but the whole school approach towards it, to ensure that everywhere we go, not just year 6, but any classroom, the behaviour is at a very, very high level.
You've seen the school transformed, I think, certainly my interpretation. And it probably, would it be fair to say it started with behaviour? Because I mean, in my experience, if behaviour is not right, pedagogy is a futile endeavour. Would that be a fair reflection of the journey you guys have been on certainly the last 5 years, if not over those 10 years?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was there when we went into special measures, not long after I first started. And then obviously Gareth joined throughout during COVID times when we were in special measures. And that was the first thing we had to do, was transform the teaching of the teachers and the classrooms, and behaviour was a big part of that. And we wanted a consistent approach, a way of actually trying to improve our own teaching as well as for us and the children. And what we had from that was a massive transformation in the way that we teach and the way that is resulted in the outcomes for the children as well.
And if you look at the approaches back then to where we are now, it's been quite a journey in the subsequent years to get to that well-oiled machine, Kieran, that you saw a few months ago.
On the surface, when you walk around the school, you've got children holding doors open for you, being really polite, calmly moving around the school, all the sort of like the green flags of like things are going really well here. And then when you go into the classroom and you see the sort of the high expectations of behavior, but also the pupils, how safe they feel, and it's not like, it's not just strict. It is very much the embodiment of warm strict, because they know they're cared for, and you can see the relationships with teachers, but you also see that those pupils are absolutely ready for whatever is coming in class because of the systems you guys have got in place. So I think the best way to frame this are almost like your 5 sort of key principles, your 5 ways to promote positive behavior for learning. And I don't know, Jack, if you want to kick us off with what's the first sort of principle you guys have got?
So our first principle we've got is about teaching the routines, not just the rules. And any of these principles that we'll talk about in the next bit of time is consistent across the whole school. I think that's a really important thing, how that it's not just us in year 6, it's every single teacher. And then, so it's every single class, which is really, really important. So the first technique, or the first number we've got, is about teaching routines. We explicitly teach routines for lining up, walking around the school, giving out books. Usually, quite often in the very first week in September, that first couple of days is dedicated to teaching the routines. We'll lay off on some of the learning to start with until we have got everything that we need to, in terms of the participation in the learning, how to answer a question, how to listen if somebody else is speaking, how to walk down to assembly, how to give out a packet of books or a pack of sheets. And it sounds really, pedantic or anything like that, but it is essential for becoming natural to the children then throughout the year. And if it's not done correctly, it will just be repeated, and it will be ingrained into the children that this is how we do it, this is how Sir or Miss wants to see it. And if it's not done in that way, then Sir or Miss will pull us up and we'll have to do it again. And then it gives them that opportunity to say they know the expectations clearly. They know exactly what's expected of them when another child is speaking. They know they have to look, they have to turn, they have to listen. And having those time to teach those routines is essential for trying to build what you saw later on in the year, where it was very natural in the classroom.
At the very beginning of the year, we get the buy-in from the children. Usually in year 6, they've been through the school, so they already have those routines well ingrained. So we're just strengthening what's already been put in place before. But the buy-in is all about those positive behaviours for learning to get them where they need to be at the end of the year, and involving them in that process, saying, these routines, they might come across as we're being really picky or fussy, but it's really engineered so that we're saving the maximum amount of time. And I actually shared that with my class this September, is our most valuable resource with you is time. We have a finite amount of time with you, for us to all achieve what we want to achieve in a year. These procedures and these routines that we're going to practice, that we're going to become fluent in, they're all going to save us time. So the children know exactly then why, and they buy into that. And as Jack said, then it is a case of routinely practicing them and keeping it positive as well. We're not training robots here, making sure that there's that warmth and your teacher's personality is coming out and through when you're doing it with a smile. But if you do see something that they're not quite getting or not quite doing it, it's just no emotion in it at all. You just keep going over it, keep drilling it, making sure that those procedures, I think it's in the Teach Like a Champion by Doug Lemov. It's all about tight routines and modeling those so that the children can see what success looks like.
Having the children know why we were doing it is really important. So we'll sit and we'll explain, why we're lining up like that, why we're walking in quiet. It's because of this, it's because of that. Why are we giving out the books in this way? Oh, it's because it's saving us this amount of time to do something else. And then explaining that to them really gives them an understanding of actually, okay, that's why we're doing it. And creating that buy-in then of the children is a huge thing for making it successful. And again, it's that consistency as well across the school. We'll all spend time doing that. We've got as you said at the beginning, a very diverse school community from various different backgrounds. But we believe every child, can do that and does do that, as you saw. And it allows the children then to focus their attention on the learning rather than any of the routines once they've been embedded and once they become so natural they don't think about it. It's just what they do. But it is really important then, if it does, like it does everywhere, if it slips throughout the year, it's really important just to go back to it and say, we've lost a bit here. Let's think about why we're doing it. Let's go back. Let's have another practice. So that if it does, drop a little bit, we go back to the high expectations. And like you say, it's not done in a horrible way. Like Elliot was saying, it's warm. It's getting their understanding for it. So they really know why they're doing it and getting them to really understand it as well, which is really important.
Yeah, it's a solid investment to do at the start of the year, and it really helps the children thrive when the expectations are predictable. They're not having to decode their teacher and how will Sir react if I do something this way or that way. Predictability gives them that safety then, and they can put all of their cognitive load then into the learning, and that's where we've found great success this year. And we've had lots of external visitors, as Jack will probably mention later as well, who have agreed with that. They've seen excellent learning because the behaviour and the routines are so tight and consistent throughout the school, and that goes back to our leadership team as well, and Gareth giving us that clear direction. Gareth always mentions the quote, attention is the currency of learning, and all of our behaviour management strategies, which we'll go through today, that's the goal, isn't it, to protect their attention, because children these days, they have so many distractions, social media and all these digital mediums. Where school's one places we're asking them to concentrate and focus for long extended periods of time, which they may not necessarily be used to, as children might have been 20, 30 years ago. So yeah, it is really important that in September you go through all of these routines so that you get that behavior for learning that you ultimately want.
Yeah, because as you guys are speaking, obviously the why is so much of an important part of how St. Peter's operates, and you mentioned attention. Every decision that you guys are making is geared towards maximizing sort of learning, and like, especially given the fact that you're typically moving in the opposite direction to the external advice within your context and wheels. And so believing in that why is so important. So it makes total sense that the systems you have in place for behavior open the door for that learning. I suppose the thing that I'm asking lots of people is about the reinforcement and almost like that revisiting, because you guys mentioned, obviously, because you're so 5 odd years down the line, that's less frequent. How often, perhaps when you were first establishing this sort of approach, were you having to revisit, and was there any stigma to revisiting with your classroom, and how would that process go?
The thing we used to do when we were introducing it as a staff was we would practice it different things as a staff during our PL sessions. So our team of teaching and learning team would deliver the technique or whatever it is we were focused on that week, and we would practice it in PL sessions, which at first was a little bit new to us, and it took a bit of getting used to. But doing that bit of practice, and Doug Lemov, those of you who have ever been on like Teach Like a Champion trainings, would do the same thing. And then we'd take it back to the classroom and we would go through it with the class. And Gareth and the SLT would say, if it hasn't worked, just go back to it. It's about reinforcing it when you need to. If the first couple of times they're not getting it, it's just keeping going at it, keep going back to the explanation, and eventually it all came through. And if you could go into like a reception class, for example, yes, the expectations would be different and what you would see would be different, but the techniques and the economy of language would all be the same, in the hope that having that consistency across the school really helps with the children to embed the techniques and focus clearly on what they're able to do. But yeah, going back and repeating and reinforcing was encouraged more than told not to. We're not doing it once and then forgetting about it, because then it's not going to become embedded. It really is about going back when you need to, and it's a teacher judgment then to see, I think we've slipped off a little bit on that, let's take a bit of time now just to go over it. And it was absolutely fine to do that, because otherwise it really didn't come through as a natural routine if it wasn't continued to be practiced.
Yeah, and it's not a perfect science either. There's going to be elements of this that we will need to revisit down the line as well. I remember back to when we first introduced like our first few techniques, be seen looking, and make sure your teachers, you're scanning the room for any children not tracking you or not listening or so on. And we like any school, we'd have coaching observations where the senior leadership team would, there were a certain number of children who weren't tracking you in that bit of the lesson and so on. And that's just something that we've gradually improved over time. It's, consistency beats intensity. And so, making sure that those small interactions throughout the day, you're just being completely consistent with those routines and procedures, and, making sure that the children's attention is protected at all times.
The reason I mentioned this is because I think, like, certainly when I was first starting out, that would be one of the things I'd be afraid to do. I thought, okay, this is me failing. And so actually what we need to do is reinforce that actually if things slip, go back, reestablish, just like you would with learning, because they're not going to use the written method of multiplication first time round, are they? So why would they be following the behavior policy or the routines, the expectations? So Elliot and Jack make a powerful point in this episode. Routines do not become normal just because they've been written down. They become normal because everyone understands them, teaches them, and reinforces them. And the same is true for curriculum. The story of mathematics gives your school one coherent mathematical journey from early years to the end of primary. Teachers are not delivering a collection of isolated lessons. They're contributing to a sequence that builds knowledge deliberately over time. And because the resources are supported by professional development, the curriculum is not simply handed to staff and hoped for. Teachers are helped to understand the thinking behind it and make it work in their classrooms. And that changes the leadership conversation. Instead of checking whether everyone has found something to teach next week, you can concentrate on the quality of explanation, representation, questioning, and ultimately pupil thinking. Now, if you want a mathematics curriculum that becomes part of how your school teaches, rather than another initiative used unevenly, get in touch today through the link in the show notes or by emailing us at support@alta-education.com. So, Elliot, what's your second sort of way to promote positive behavior for learning?
So, Kieran, it's really to focus on the positives. So using your language intentionally with the children to establish what the correct behavior should be. So rather than focusing on the negative, you're talking or you're turning around or you're playing with your pencil or object, it's using phrases. And again, this comes from Doug Lemov's Teach Like a Champion, such as, thank you to everyone who is ready, or I can see that this table is tracking, or this table's books are already out and open and you're ready to start. And the reason why we do that is because it models the expectations, it reinforces what success looks like to the children. It reduces also confrontation. As the teacher, you're the person who really controls the thermostat or the temperature of the room. And if you're constantly having battles with the children who aren't quite listening or aren't quite focusing 100%, then that can raise, the temperature in the room, and it can actually spoil relationships as well. So I find that this approach really helps me as a teacher, because those children who are, say, more prone to those negative behaviors, they have that model of what success looks like, and they can see the children around them who are doing that. This is the way I get my teacher's attention, is by behaving in that manner and that way. And that creates positive atmosphere by osmosis then through the classroom. And when you came in to see us, you probably noticed how calm the children were. That is, again, time to implement that is really important. That has been built up over time. And no 2 days are the same. There'll be some days where, you know, a child would need a consequence, but when the pressure's on, the day-to-day pressure of the learning, you know, people go to their defaults, don't they? Their natural default. And what we've tried to do at St. Peter's is make our natural default this calm, positive atmosphere. You know, an important point though to mention is to not ignore poor behavior. There's just ways using Teach Like a Champion that we address poor behavior. So we try obviously to not disrupt the learning in any way. So we will use a technique called least invasive intervention, where you might have to invade a student's space, not in an aggressive way, you know, in a positive way, giving them that chance to, you know, rejoin the group. So you might use a phrase such as, you know, I noticed you weren't tracking that person, or I noticed you weren't fully focused in that bit. I know you can do this, you know, make sure you bounce back. And again, that all feeds into positive behavior.
So when you see those positive behaviors in the classroom, like Elliot was talking about, it's noticing those ones, not picking up on every negativity that you might see. Even though you know it's there, the little ones, you can, by saying, you know, oh, thank you to so-and-so for you doing this, you would hope that the person who's not doing it then corrects the behavior themselves. And then you've noticed it, but you've not picked up on it. You haven't singled them out, but you've made a positive, just a positive frame into someone else. And then the person who wasn't doing what you were hoping is picked up on it and has then corrected their behavior. And then the child who was doing it correctly is getting that positive sense in the classroom for doing well. And then the child who wasn't is going, right, okay, I need to improve there. And again, like Elliot said, of course, there's times where you have to make a correction to somebody, but our corrections, we try and be brief, calm, respectful to the child, so that everything that we're saying to them doesn't, you know, be negative all the time. And then if we are, it can be anonymous as well. Quite often we'll say, oh, no, we're just waiting for one child. And then the rest of the class don't know who you're talking to, but hopefully that one child who wasn't ready knows it was them, and then they'll be ready. So it's all about trying to reframe our way of speaking. And again, lots of these techniques and lines come from Teach Like a Champion that Gareth has introduced to us. And this economy of language, again, this is consistency. I know we'll talk about that a lot as we go today, but you would hear that line such as, waiting for one table in a year 6 classroom, or you might hear that down in year 1. So the children then know that's exactly what's coming from my teacher, whether that be their class teacher or somebody who's covering for PPA or whatever it might be. That economy of language is really important, because our children are held to quite high standards in the classroom, very high standards, and we expect them to keep to those high standards. And it's really important then, if they're not, that we pull them up on it, but in a nice, positive way. So they're still being shown, you know, that compassion and love for the teacher, but they know full well that what is expected of them. And you tend to see, like Elliot was talking about earlier, when they know the expectations are, they're very clear, they're very set in stone, that they prefer that. They know exactly what's expected of them in the classroom. They know exactly what their teacher wants of them, and they can do it then. They're not thrown off because they weren't expecting that. They know this is what's needed to be done, and hopefully then they can do it. And as you say, there are times where we know that the children can make mistakes, you know, make a bad decision. And it's just about trying to, like Elliot was saying then, bring them back to, oh, I know you didn't do quite right there. Next time, you know, this is what you need to do. And it's not doing that in front of the whole class. It might be that you just take 30 seconds just to talk to that child that you've noticed when you were doing your teaching, for example. But it all comes back to trying to frame the positivity in your language as a teacher, rather than any negatives.
Can I just add to that as well? I think it really dovetails well with our Catholic ethos, the narration of the positive and preserving the children's dignity even when they have made mistakes. It's something that we were commended on this year in our Section 50 RE inspection. We had graded excellence for all of these various areas, but one of those was with behaviour with the children and attitudes towards learning and relationships as well. So I think, yeah, that's something really important, that this approach isn't just a behavior approach. It really works well with the Catholic ethos of the school.
I really like the temperature analogy, because I often use bank balance, but actually, as you were describing, I think actually, if you're too hot or too cold, you're getting a similarly negative experience. It's about that balance. It's the Goldilocks zone, isn't it? So that's definitely something I'm going to tweak because I often talk about if you go into negative balance, and I never remember if it's red or black that is bad, but I know that I don't want to be in negative with my class, but actually that temperature is much more about how we balance things. Now, this is very much a staple of my approach to behavior management, but I've seen teachers who are promoting the praise until they're blue in the face and the class aren't listening. So you guys are describing, okay, so you got your least invasive intervention. You've got the certainty that there's a consequence coming whenever there's no, even if it's not demonstrated in that moment in the lesson. Is there anything else that you guys have in place that incentivizes making the most of the least invasive, that reminder, rather than getting to the next stage, for instance, which might be something more consequential? I don't know what happens in that situation. It sounds like it's not happening now, but it may have in the past. And I'm just thinking of teachers, particularly inexperienced teachers, who I've seen sort of not really fully have the full support of everything that's in place in school.
We have quite a structured behaviour policy in school, both positive and negative. We use, for positive praise, we use house points, for example. So after the positive praise, if you think there's a very deserving child who's done something really well, you could offer them a house point, and they are quite forward, the children in our school, for wanting to get house points. That's quite intrinsic in them, in terms of their behaviour. And the same for the negative. We have quite a laddered approach to consequences getting higher and higher. Again, like you said, you would hope that you don't have to keep increasing, but of course there's times where you might have to. So we'll start by an anonymous correction in the classroom for a child who may not be listening, and then you might have to go increase to maybe at least invasive, where you might go and speak to them individually, and then we just work our way up the scale then. So we have quite a structured scale where the next step would be, right, then you have to have a chat with them at this, then they might have to have a more serious consequence where they have to miss out on this or miss out on that. So again, it comes back to the same thing, the children knowing exactly what's going to happen next if they carry on. So they know that if Oscar's spoken to me now, he's told me I need to be okay, that would be the end of it. Then that would be forgotten about if they did improve. But if they keep going, then they would know full well, oh, actually this is going to go up a level now, so it's going to give me the next thing. And then if I keep going, I'm going to have to go and see a senior leader, or I'm going to have to go somewhere at break time, kind of thing. So we have quite a structured approach to the consequences in school, and that's again consistent across the school, and the children are fully aware of that. But yeah, it's just about making sure, as you say, when you're in the classroom, to make sure that you don't just keep going and going and going, because you have to try and keep that control as well. Calm, try, as a teacher, you want to keep calm, you want to remain in charge. And again, all of that comes from the positivity and the high expectations of behavior. So the children know exactly what's expected of them. And I think that's the biggest thing for keeping them, well behaved and calm and engaged in the lessons, is having those high expectations.
Jack's right, and if you're modeling that calm throughout the year as well, you're being that perfect role model for those pupils. For if there is a moment of conflict, this is the appropriate way to behave in that moment. Speaking to them with a calm voice. If you walked into Jack and I's classroom, it's very calm environment. Naturally, they're children, they will make mistakes, and there are some days in the year where, we go back to the temperature analogy, the temperature's a little bit higher than usual, but going back to that default, the children knowing that laddered approach, they quite often correct themselves long before they get to that stage. But it's also really important to know that you have tools to go to, or steps to go to, and you have the full support of your senior leadership team, and the parents as well. Making sure your parents are involved in that process, and the child, involving the child. And if they do get to that stage, giving them that opportunity to bounce back or come back. Yeah, I think that's really important, and that's what really sets us apart.
If you're seeing them carry on in the classroom and you say to them, if this carries on, this is going to happen, then hopefully they would think, okay, I'm going to stop now. And then it's just about having to follow through. If they do carry on, then you just have to go. Sometimes you think, but you have to follow through with that consequence then, in a hope that they would learn from it and it would be put behind them and we move on. And quite often when we do, if they have, required a more serious consequence for something they've done, it's not about massively being told off then, it's about reflecting on what they did wrong. And they might go and sit with a senior leader or deputy head or whoever, and they reflect on what happened or what could you have done there? How do we go and improve that? It's not you're going for a telling off or you're going to be shouted at. It's you're going down now. You can reflect on what you've done, think about where you made your mistake, and if that comes again now, what would we do differently? And I think that really helps them to think about what they actually did wrong and how they would potentially change that if they were in that situation again.
It's the certainty, not the intensity. And actually, where I've seen those teachers flounder, it's that they weren't supported by a consistent set of expectations of pupils not being aware of what the consequence might be. And then so they would go from 0 to 100, when really what you guys are describing is a very slow transition towards ever increasing degrees of responsibility. The consequence is the same no matter what, no matter what day it is, which is, like I said, the most important stuff. I think that's really important, because whenever I've seen this interpreted as let's be positive all the time and things will be fine, and actually, it's a much more nuanced and rounded approach. So I think you guys have done a really good job of explaining the nuance. Expecting pupils to participate means refusing to let anyone disappear from the lesson. But to act on that principle, teachers need to know who's secure, who's guessing, and who needs different opportunities to practice. And that's where ASIL Pro comes in. It turns assessment into targeted rehearsal for every pupil, while giving teachers and leaders a clearer view of learning across a class, school, or group of schools. It doesn't ask you to replace your curriculum for the curriculum for Wales and Scotland's curriculum for excellence, for example, to the standards used in England, Ireland, Australia, and the United States of America. The correlation has already been done. Whatever framework sits above the learning, ASIL Pro helps make sure pupils master the mathematics beneath it. Discover more at asil.pro. That's SEEL.pro. So, Elliot, what's your third principle or third way?
So this one Jack's briefly mentioned, but I think it's really important. It's probably one of our most powerful techniques, or at least when we started this approach, the teach like a champion approach to behavior, is to expect 100% participation 100% of the time. And that was something in the lesson that you taught, Kieran, where I had to use a least invasive intervention on a particular pupil. And that person quickly came back into the lesson, back into line. So it's a big mindset shift, because I've taught in previous schools in the past where, if you're not listening, it's sink or swim. The children that are listening, they'll get it and they'll do well. But in our school, we're giving them all that high expectation, and we're not settling for anything less, because if you do settle for only 90% of the children listening, children are clever. They'll quickly think, right, I can get away with this. But if you quite literally say pens down, eyes this way, or track me, and there's children who aren't, we quite literally stand there still like a statue and wait. And we wait and we wait, and silence is actually a really powerful tool in that instance. And children will suddenly, they'll pick their head up and go, oh, okay, I need to be listening. And we do not continue until everyone's ready, because every child deserves the same expectation, and they learn then our real expectation. If we accept 90%, they will stop at 90%. If we expect 100%, 100% becomes normal, and that only gets that's one that we quite often have to enforce quite a lot throughout the year. At various times in the year, towards the end of term, that can sometimes be the one that drops off. So it's really important for the teacher then to re-establish that throughout the year. But I think the keys for this technique to be really successful is to, never shout, never threaten, never become emotional. Simply use phrases like "I'll wait," or "We're nearly there," or "Waiting on 2 more," or "Let's try that again. Track me in 1, 2, 3," or in Wales we say "in die tree." And this consistency, it's not about catching the children out. I'm not using this technique to go, right, I can see that person's not listening, that person's not listening. It's to help the children. It's to remove that ambiguity. And for this one, when I've spoken about it before, I'll be challenged and say, don't you find that quite a controlling technique? But it's not about control. It's about creating the conditions so that the child can learn, or the team, the class can learn, because they all deserve that access to instruction. But like I say, we and Jack will agree, I hope, on this. We don't expect perfection immediately, and Lord knows in the younger year groups, this one takes a bit more time. But we do expect improvement every day, every week, every month, every year, through practice.
It's probably one of the biggest ones where we found the biggest change in the way that we were teaching. Quite often we'd get the children sat down and we just start teaching, start going through whatever we had to do, our maths lesson, our English lesson. And then you got one child who's looking out the window, one child who's fiddling with their pen, another child who is chatting to the person next to them. So Gareth consistently said, we talked about attention earlier. If they're not paying attention, they're not listening. It could be going in one ear, out the other of what you're saying. And then you come to start your work and you quite often have, sir, what are we doing? And you think, oh, I've just spent 20 minutes talking. So it was trying to get rid of that as well. It was trying to get everything that we do was trying to minimize distractions. You'll probably notice that the classrooms are quite minimal in terms of the way what's on the walls and what's display wise and things like that, because we're trying to avoid distractions in terms of what the children are looking at. So they're not reading what's on the wall while you're teaching. And it was a big thing, for us to say they shouldn't be fiddling with their pen when they're on the table. They shouldn't be writing in their book or doodling while you're talking, because again, that's taking their attention away from whatever it is you're saying. And it had to be done in a positive way. As Elliot was saying there, none of this is done to say, oh, I can see a child over there who's not listening, I'm going to ask them a question. That's not what we were intending to do. It's not to catch any child out, but it's to make sure that every child has the best possible opportunity to learn and the best possible outcomes when the time they leave us in year 6. So we combine a lot of different techniques, from Teach Like a Champion to help us with this, from cold calling to mini whiteboards to retrieval practice to turn and talk discussion. And as a teacher, we have to consistently check for understanding, consistently check for participation and listening as we're going through the lesson. So if we're doing an activity on mini whiteboards and we ask them to hold up their whiteboards, we will expect every child to hold up their whiteboards and every child to be ready with it. If we're doing turn and talk and discussion, we'll expect every child to be chatting and talking about what's the task at hand. And if they're not, then they'll be pulled up, or they'll be told, you need to be in a positive and a warm way, but so they know what's expected of them. And we're trying to encourage them then to be independent, to set them up for the best possible opportunities in high school. And, as a result, this change in our culture almost across the school is all to do with the highest active engagement we can have in the lessons. We want 100% of the pupils 100% engaged in the learning. And it's commented upon multiple times when we have visitors in the school. Every child is looking at you. Every child is listening. If a child puts their hand up and it speaks, the children turn themselves to look at them while they're speaking. Or we've taught them to build off one another. If somebody says something, we've taught them different lines and techniques to say, oh, I agree with so-and-so because. And again, it just shows that you've listened to the point before. You've listened to what your classmate has said in a way that shows that, again, independence. And it clearly has a result, because we've had highly successful reading ages coming out of year 6 over the last 5 years. We're averaging, like 13 years in year 6 coming out at the end. So it's a real, and all of that's not just one thing, but that certainly plays a part. The engagement in the learning and the active participation of all the children is really key. And the children know that they could be chosen in a lesson to answer a question. They could be chosen to read during a read aloud or during a text that we're reading. And again, it's not done, oh, I don't want to be chosen to read, or I don't want to answer a question. We've tried to build that culture in the classroom where it's okay, and they know it's okay to make a mistake. They're not scared of making a mistake, because you have that culture in the classroom where that's absolutely fine. And again, as we were talking about earlier, it doesn't come overnight. This is a long, this is a good few years journey, but it's really reaping the rewards now, especially for the children who have been there throughout the whole time.
It helps to put that ownership on it for the children as well. Like Jack said, the intentional planning of those techniques, it's where rather than creating positive behavior for learning, we're using learning to create the positive behavior there. So Kieran, you used the whiteboard route in the lesson you came in for. So making sure that the 100% concentration and participation 100% of the time, it's that high ratio, then you're going to get better outcomes of behavior and of learning. So they dovetail quite nicely. But yeah, it's really contributed to high outcomes throughout the time that we've had this approach, especially in reading. And I believe it backs up the belief then that every child can achieve academically.
You've got the toolkit, so obviously you're utilizing Taste Like a Champion, and you've got all these different strategies, different approaches, but because you understand, or because teachers understand the why, okay, if you remember what you pay attention to, memory is the residue of thought, etc., then you can then choose the right tool for the task at hand, rather than using them because you've been told to use them. I'm going to do cold calling, but I'm going to throw cold calling into every situation, perhaps even when it's not necessary. So it is very much a case of the why guiding the behavior in the classroom. And then that also, in your notes, you mentioned sweating the small stuff. But that's exactly what's happening, like down to displays, down to, why am I using nonverbal communication? It's very much thinking, leaving no stone unturned in terms of this is what we want. This is how we get to it, and I think that's probably the most important point, is that's the relationship, so like you say, it's not because you want control over the pupils, it's because you know how to support them in getting from where they are to where you want them to be.
I've been part of the team delivering these techniques and things to staff in school, and it is like, as you're saying, it's like a toolkit. You give them a multitude of techniques and you say, these are what you can use in your classroom. You don't have to use them all in every lesson. You don't have to use this one in every single lesson, but they're there for you to use whenever you see best fit as a teacher. And then giving them a variety of different techniques to say to the staff, here's the list. We've delivered the training, we've practiced them, they understand the why we do them, and then they're there for them to use then to pick out in a lesson or in their planning where they think that'll work. And some are used more consistently than others, and then some will be picked out as you think as a lesson that is needed for it. But it's about letting them pick what's needed. And then quite often we'll talk to staff and then we'll go back to it in PL sessions then, where we'll say, a staff might say, I'm not quite sure on that one, or could we need a bit more on that? And then we'll go back to it and we'll reinforce. And we're due a cycle now when we come back in September of going back to quite a few of these techniques, because it's been a little while since we've been going over them in our professional learning sessions. And like you said earlier, it's so important to not just do it and forget about it, but do it, go back to it, reinforce, especially for any new staff that we have coming in, to make sure that everyone's up to speed as well.
So again, I think the last two techniques we've kind of touched upon whilst we've been going through, but important to highlight them in isolation. So number 4 is relationships through high expectations. So for this one, we really believe in our school that children feel safest with adults who are calm, predictable, fair, and consistent. And so those high expectations that we have, that communicates almost belief to the children. So we might use phrases such as, we won't use phrases such as, you're always talking. We'll substitute that with something like, I need you listening because I know you can. So that really helps then to promote that positivity, that positive behavior from the child. And it separates the child from the behavior then as well. It's like, I can do this. I'm just having a moment. I can come back. I can do this. And so, it's a case of addressing the behavior, correcting it, protecting their dignity, moving on so that they can have that chance to learn effectively. And one really important factor of this is, fresh start every day. A child could have had one of the worst days of the year, but then the next day, it's a fresh start. It's a clean slate. You bring them back into the fold. It's a team approach. making sure and knowing your learners as well. There's some that need that, consistency. Some may need a bit more of an arm around them approach as well. So we can involve techniques such as, making sure we're greeting them every day, knowing what their interests are, following up privately, poor behavior, showing warmth, being fair, being consistent. So I feel like that warmth and those high expectations, they really work together. That promotes that positive behavior in our classrooms.
Quite often it's commented on how, the relationships between the teachers and pupils are really strong, and they are built around respect, care, love, and the children know that. The children know that they are cared for and they feel safe in the school. We've had, the well-being of the children is high in the school, and that is trying to get away from, yes, what we're doing is not strict, but also warm as well. It's not, as Elliot was saying earlier, it's not about having, it's not robots or training robots at all. It's trying to do these things because we care about them, because we want them to have the best opportunities in life, because we want them to leave our school in year 6 ready to go to high school with a good foundation. And we do that as well through other relationships that we build, through the trust and through consistency again, because we know that every child needs a different approach, but every child can still conform to what we expect of them, and they do. And it's about encouraging the pupils to hold themselves accountable as well, in a sense of, if they know they've made a mistake, then they should know inside intrinsically themselves that actually I need to go back and improve that. And that's all to do with the relationships between teachers and pupils as well. They know they want to do well for themselves, but they also want to do well for their teacher, and because they want to do the best that they can. And that comes from our high expectations and our high level of care for the children, not just the children in our class, but all the children across the school. And providing the support that we provide really helps them to build trust and a mutual level of trust between the both of us, to really allow all the children to thrive in the classroom and really progress well throughout the year.
The thing is that's often the accusations sort of sent towards people who employ these kinds of strategies, isn't it? It's that you clearly don't care about the kids, you just want them to be compliant. And really, it couldn't be further from the truth. It's one of those false dichotomies. Normally, when there's skin in the game, some sort of grift in play, but actually, when you see it in real schools, particularly in challenging circumstances, those children are all thriving because the sort of playing field is equal and the expectations are consistent. And like we all know, everyone thrives when they know what's expected of them. As teachers, we thrive when our head teacher is calm and level every day, and the same is true for our pupils. Does this then, Jack, feed into the 5th point that you guys have got as your sort of 5th way to promote positive behavior for learning?
It does, yeah. And we've touched upon this, I think, in every single one. It's about creating a whole school culture, not just a successful classroom. You could have one great teacher in year 4, for example, or year 3, or wherever they are, who's doing really great things. But if it's not going on in every classroom, then as soon as they leave that room, then it goes out the window. So one of the biggest things we did was to make sure that everyone in every classroom was doing great things. And it's commented on quite a lot how you go from reception. If you're ever wandering around the school, you might hear a teacher in reception say the same or a similar thing in terms of language to a teacher in year 6. And yes, the expectations would be different and what you would expect of the children would be different, of course, but the language and the culture belongs to everyone. And that's not just teachers, that's teaching assistants, support staff, anyone who works in the school. And we've trained everyone who works there, from midday supervisors to the caretaker, because we want them, when they're chatting to the children as well, to be, have the same expectations of them when they're in the dinner hall or whether they're on the playground. It's about respect and making sure that they show that to everyone. And again, it comes from building relationships as well, but it's that common language, the coaching that Elliot mentioned earlier. Once we don't like to call them observations, but it's 20-minute coaching sessions where a senior leader will come in. For example, I might have come in and I might sit with them and we'll talk about a lot of positive things, and it might be just one thing or to try and work on, or this technique would have worked well there, have a go at that. It's not intrusive, it's very supportive in terms of trying to get the teachers to improve in themselves as well. Professional development for them to really try and make sure the expectations are clear and high across the whole school. And again, it's just that consistency with everything. And again, this comes from that Teach Like a Champion implementation that we had, sort of 5-6 years ago, giving the staff practical strategies, practical techniques that they could really use in their teaching, to help them. So it's not just saying, try and go and improve your questioning, and the teachers go, well, how am I meant to do that? It's actually, well, this would work well. Try this type of question, or try this, try that. And these techniques that we give them gives them an opportunity to trial it in their classroom, come back to professional learning sessions, feedback, talk about what went well, talk about what didn't go well, and then talk about next steps. That's a really important step we've tried to put in as well, is not just sending it out to teachers and telling them to do it, but giving the teachers a chance to have a go at it in the classroom, bring their thoughts back to us and discuss it. And if it didn't go well, why didn't it go well? What do we need to change? If it did go great, then brilliant, let's keep it going. So it's just about being a successful whole school community and a whole culture, not just the single classrooms that are doing things well, but having it across the school.
The result of what Jack's just said is, the children move between year groups with far more confidence than usual. We often, at the end of a year, like most schools do, you ask a child, what are you most looking forward to? And because they know that they don't need to learn a new lining up system or behavior expectation or a routine, they'll still be practiced, but they'll have that knowledge about them already. So it takes that nervousness away. And the same can be said for cover teachers or teachers moving between year groups. They know that they don't have to adapt too much. They know that consistency is there. I could pop into Jack's classroom, in the first week and feel confident that the language I'm going to intentionally choose to use with his class would be the same in any other class around the school. So that really, helps. And it goes back to what I said earlier, that it helps the children can put all of their cognitive load then into their learning, rather than trying to work out, what's this teacher like or that one there. So that consistency across adults, that whole school approach, creates that security for the children. Some pushback we've had in the past has been, does that consistency remove the personality or the inventiveness of the teacher or so on? But the answer to that is no. Teachers still showcase their personality through these techniques. So humor, relationships, individuality and creativity. Consistency is not about personalities, it's about expectations.
All the adults in the school modeling and setting the high standards as well. And that comes from leadership, but also staff at all levels. And I think we've had massive buy-in from all the adults, and we've trained up all the different members of the school community to really, so they understand it fully. And then it's all built upon that belonging, the consistency, the positive relationships. And then we know that we want every child to succeed. We want every child to leave us with a good foundation, as I said earlier, to go to high school with excellent behaviour, excellent attitudes to learning, so they can carry on with the great things we've taught them when they go to high school. And I think that's the key thing. We're hoping to set them up well for whatever it is they do in high school and in the future.
The whole school approach, it wasn't just for Teach Like a Champion techniques. We had that as well for lesson structure. And I think that's really helped to promote positive behavior. So Kieran and I don't know if you recall, we had a bit of a chat before you came and taught a lesson where I went through with you, this is our typical structure in the juniors for a maths lesson. And so that structure, just like procedures and routines and behaviors, that's practiced early on in the year. So the children have that time for exploration in maths, and then some self-assessment, and then the knowledge part where the teacher is doing the teaching, and the children get to see that model, and then they have that guided practice, and then that independent practice. All of this combines with the behavior then to create that predictable structure. So the behavior supports the learning, but also the learning supports the behavior as well.
It makes so much sense when you hear you guys talking about this and how all those pieces come together, because I'm sure there are plenty of teachers who are on their own, an island, when really what they need is everyone to be moving in the same direction. I think, the teaching and learning feeds the behavior, and the behavior feeds the teaching and learning. And so thinking about things, being really clear in your expectations for things and the why is probably, I think, the driving force behind everything we do. So, I mean, the 5 we've got: teach routines, not rules; narrate the positive more than the negative; aim for 100% participation 100% of the time; build relationships through high expectations; and create a whole school culture, not just classroom. And so I think those 5 things do 2 things. I think they allow leaders to think about, if we want to improve behavior in our school, what should we be thinking about? But also, if in September I'm back in school and I'm not being supported, well, when I'm looking at other schools and going for a walk, I can see what sort of flags am I looking for, both red and green. Although I don't know if green flags is actually a thing. But what sort of markers of things are going really well here with behavior? Because I think that, the opportunity to do your job to the best of your ability must be one of the driving forces behind becoming a teacher. To know that you're doing a good job is definitely one, and knowing that you're valued. But this is creating the conditions so that teachers can feel that value, I think. So yes, I don't know. Is there anything you guys would like to summarize, to round off, to say as we sort of say goodbye to this mini series on behavior, where I think you guys have done a really good job of rounding off the real life experience of some of the things we've been discussing over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think that's really important, Kieran, that comfort that you mentioned. A lot of teachers in the school, myself included, since Gareth arrived and brought all of these techniques to introduce to us, have commented and said we feel like we've never taught better. And that's ultimately why we want to be in the job, to do that really well. And gaining that positive behavior is a stepping stone. It's a vehicle towards the learning. Behavior is not about control. It's about creating those conditions where learning can happen, where attention is protected. When an adult is relentlessly calm, consistent, explicit about what they want and what success looks like, then I feel like the child will flourish. The goal isn't to get them behaving just because the teacher's watching. It's giving them good habits that will serve them well in their, as Jack said, in high school, in their first job, or whatever they go into later in life, because they've got those positive routines and experiences then as well. So, it's almost like killing 2 birds with 1 stone, isn't it? They get the knowledge of whatever you're learning about that day, but also some good human habits as well.
Behavior is not just built on rewards or sanctions, which lots of people tend to do. Oh, we do have rewards, we have sanctions, but yes, that's important, but it's all about the belonging to the school, the consistency across the school, the positive relationships, all those things we talked about, and the children having the belief as well as the teachers that they can succeed, and having every adult sharing that vision in the school. And then the behavior forms the basis then of the foundation of excellent learning. If you're spending all your day dealing with behavior in the classroom, then you can't be teaching, or certainly can't be teaching to the best that you can. So having that excellent behavior forms the foundation that we have for the excellent learning, and then eventually the excellent outcomes that we would hope for from the children who are leaving us. So yeah, I think that's really important, just to show that the behavior informs the teaching, but then also the teaching informs the behavior as well.
I suppose all that's left to do then is say thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much, Elliot.
Thanks, Kieran.
Thank you, Jack.
You're very welcome. No problem at all.
And everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.